Well, we can't say we hadn't been warned. And today, a group of top scientists has confirmed that we are now into an era of man-made climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says it'll mean more droughts, more heat waves, disruption of food and water supplies, and increased risk of conflicts over declining resources. No one, it warns, will be left untouched by the impact. Our first report tonight from our science editor, Tom Clark.
This is maize from Ukraine being offloaded in Immingham this morning. It's a snapshot of a global market that keeps our food readily available and cheap. There's 25,000 tonnes of grain in this ship, and it's here because of the weather. Our harvest last year was so dismal, we're having to import more of the stuff. But today's climate change report warns that globally, crop yields could go down across the board. So there might be less of this stuff, regardless of where you're getting it from. The impact on our food is one of the headline findings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Today's report, signed off after a week of wrangling in Yokohama, Japan, is the most detailed ever produced on the impact of climate change. The conclusion, its effects could be catastrophic and already underway.
We're not in an era where climate change is some kind of a future hypothetical. We live in a world where impacts of climate changes that have already occurred are widespread and consequential. We see impacts from the equators to the poles and from the coast to the mountains. There's no question that we live in a world that's already altered by climate change.
The report categorises future risks. Those the authors believe are highly likely include flooding to low-lying coastal regions caused by sea level rise, increased deaths due to extreme heat, and food shortages linked to warming, drought and flooding. And they also warn how risks multiply and overlap. Take the example of the Philippines typhoon. The poorest living in fragile homes, dependent on threatened fish stocks, suffered the most from the storm.
I think everyone should be worried about the impact of climate change. It's going to cost our country and the world a huge amount if we don't act in terms of human health, in terms of food security, higher food prices, in terms of the overall impact on the economy. So I think this is a wake-up call.
Not all scientists agree about the impacts. Take global food supply. Grain traders say there's plenty of slack in the system.
If climate change results in more severe droughts in the main production areas of the world, there is the potential for food prices to remain high. But there is still significant potential to increase production in areas of the world that aren't currently maximising their output.
Even among climate change researchers, there's disagreement about the severity of its impacts. One of this report's authors withdrew his name from it, arguing some scenarios are overblown.
The report emphasises the risks of climate change. It goes into all sorts of negative effects, often on the very silly assumptions, such as that people can't observe the weather around them and don't respond to changes in the climate. I just don't think it's appropriate to tell scare stories.
But while we argue about the detail, simple physics suggests we might see 3 or 4 degrees of global warming by the end of this century. The rest of today's report focuses on the need to adapt, and adapt soon, to the warming that's already coming our way.